$200 billion. That is not a market. That is a decision. A decision made in the years after World War II to replace something that worked, something that fed an entire nation through its darkest hour, with something you had to buy every single season, forever. I found the original records, the USDA wartime manuals from 1942 and 1943, government documents printed by the millions and distributed to American families when the country had no choice but to feed itself. They described 6 soil methods in plain language, no chemistry degree required, no equipment to purchase, no corporation standing between you and your harvest, just soil, seed, and techniques so effective that 20 million families use them to grow 40% of America's fresh vegetables without a single bag of synthetic fertilizer. Those manuals exist. The studies that validate them exist. The researchers who spent careers documenting why these methods work, they exist too. And I am going to show you all 6, backed by named scientists and peer-reviewed data, not gardening folklore, not internet mythology, actual evidence. I'll also be honest with you about something most channels won't say out loud. One of these 6 methods is genuinely controversial. The science is mixed. Some studies show real benefits. Others found it performed no better than plain water. I will show you both sides because that is what separates real information from a sales pitch. And when I tell you the other 5 are backed by overwhelming evidence, you will know you can trust that. Here is what happened to this knowledge. When the war ended in 1945, 10 government-built ammonia plants that had been manufacturing explosives suddenly had no bombs left to build. They had surplus, they had infrastructure, they had investors. The USDA suggested spreading that surplus on farmland as synthetic fertilizer. What followed was not agriculture. It was a conversion. A $41 million government program generated $57 million for the fertilizer industry. Consumption went from 2 million tons in the late 1940s to 24 million tons by 1981. Today, that industry is worth $200 billion annually, controlled by 4 corporations, built on the foundation of methods your grandparents never needed. The 6 techniques in this video were not discredited. No study proved them wrong. No evidence emerged that they had failed. They were simply crowded out by advertising, by policy, by an industry that only survives if you stay dependent. No one is selling what you're about to learn. No corporation profits when you walk into the woods and take a handful of soil. No patent exists for a clover seed. No quarterly earnings call celebrates the day you stop buying fertilizer and start building biology. That is exactly why this knowledge disappeared. But the soil remembers, and now so will you. December 7th, 1941. Pearl Harbor. Within 1 week, the United States government did something it had never done before. It asked every American family, not soldiers, not farmers, not agricultural experts, every family to grow their own food. Secretary of Agriculture Claude Wickard launched the Victory Garden campaign with the urgency of a military order. The USDA printed millions of instructional pamphlets. NBC broadcast gardening programs on national radio. Government scientists and nutritionists fanned out across the country, teaching families how to grow food in backyards, vacant lots, rooftops, window boxes, anywhere that held soil and caught sunlight. They taught 6 specific methods, the same 6 in this video: composting, cover cropping, companion planting, seed saving, no-till mounding, living soil inoculation. Not as suggestions, as official United States government policy during the nation's greatest crisis. By 1943, something extraordinary happened. It worked. Beyond anyone's projections, it worked. 20 million gardens, 7 million acres. President Roosevelt confirmed it himself. 42% of all fresh vegetables consumed in the United States that year came from Victory Gardens.
A Gallup poll found that 54% of participating families were doing it to save money, not out of patriotism. These methods did not just feed people emotionally, they fed people actually, measurably, at scale. 75% of American housewives were canning food by January 1944, averaging 165 jars per year. Americans purchased 315,000 pressure cookers in 1943 alone, up from 66,000 the year before. The infrastructure of self-sufficiency was being rebuilt, neighborhood by neighborhood, backyard by backyard, handful of soil by handful of soil. This was not a hobby. This was not a wartime sentiment project. This was a nation feeding itself with its own hands, using methods that required nothing from an industry, nothing from a corporation, nothing from a supply chain. Just knowledge applied to living soil. And the soil responded, because it always does when you work with it instead of against it. No synthetic nitrogen, no patented seeds, no chemical inputs purchased from a company that needed quarterly earnings. Just 6 methods, a government manual, and 20 million families who learned in one growing season what their grandparents had always known. The methods worked because the biology worked. The science behind every one of these techniques existed long before the USDA put it in print. They were simply codifying what generations of farmers already understood in their hands and in their soil. Then August 1945 arrived. The war ended, the soldiers came home, the victory gardens were quietly wound down. The pamphlets stopped printing, the radio programs went off the air, and in 10 government-owned factories across the country, the people who had been building bombs began looking for their next customer. They found one. You.
The war ended. The bombs stopped. But the factories did not. During the war, the United States government had built 10 new ammonia plants to manufacture ammonium nitrate for explosives. The Tennessee Valley Authority alone had delivered 30,000 tons of anhydrous ammonia and 64,000 tons of ammonium nitrate crystal to make munitions. Massive facilities, massive infrastructure, massive surplus. And in 1946, not a single enemy left to blow up. Factory owners had a problem. They had capacity, capital, and a product with nowhere to go. So the USDA offered a solution. Spread it on farmland. Call it fertilizer. Give it away free to enough farms and watch what happens. The TVA launched a demonstration program distributing free synthetic fertilizer to 90,000 farms across the region. In the first 15 years, fertilizer sales in the TVA region grew at 3 times the national rate. That initial government investment of $41 million generated $57 billion for the fertilizer industry. More than 75% of fertilizer products used worldwide today trace their origin to a single converted weapons facility in Muscle Shoals, Alabama. Read that again. The fertilizer feeding your neighbor's lawn was born in a bomb factory. What followed was not agricultural progress. It was addiction by design. United States fertilizer consumption went from 2 million tons in the late 1940s to 24 million tons by 1981, a 10-fold increase in one generation. Suburbia replaced garden plots with ornamental lawns. Municipal codes began outlawing front yard vegetable gardens as unsightly. The knowledge in those USDA victory garden manuals was quietly retired, not debunked, not replaced by something better, simply retired. Because an industry worth $200 billion annually needed you to forget it existed. Today, 4 corporations control 75% of all domestic fertilizer production in the United States. Between 2020 and 2022, those 4 companies recorded profit increases of up to 1,500%, while their input costs rose less than 50%. Your grocery bill went up, their stock price went higher. And the gap between those 2 numbers is the cost of forgetting what 20 million families once knew for free.
The environmental ledger is devastating. The Gulf of Mexico dead zone, caused by fertilizer runoff draining from 31 states, measured 6,700 square miles in 2024, the size of New Jersey. Lifeless. Over 400 dead zones now exist worldwide. Only 35% of the nitrogen fertilizer applied to crops is actually absorbed by plants. The rest becomes pollution in rivers, groundwater, and coastal ecosystems. Agricultural runoff is the leading cause of water pollution in American rivers and streams. The Midwest has lost 57 billion metric tons of topsoil under plow agriculture. Iowa's topsoil erodes 25 times faster than it naturally forms. This is the cost of the conversion. The 6 methods that fed America were not abandoned because they stopped working. They were abandoned because they stopped being profitable. There is a difference, and it matters. Here are the 6 methods. Every one of them was in the 1943 USDA manuals. Every one of them still works. Trick 1. Chop and drop. Your grandmother never hauled plant material to a bin. She cut the plant at the base and left it exactly where it fell. A 1954 Kansas study found that mulch just half an inch thick reduced evaporation by 41%. 3 inches reduced it by 67%. Nigerian field trials found that mulched soil lost 0 tons of topsoil per year. Bare soil lost 230 tons. Same rain, same ground. The only variable was whether the plant material stayed or left. This week, cut your spent plants down and leave them. That is the entire method. Stop removing what your soil needs most. Trick 2. Forest soil inoculation. Your grandmother knew that dead soil needed living soil introduced into it. 1 teaspoon of healthy forest soil contains up to 1 billion bacteria and thousands of fungal species. In 2016, researchers at the Netherlands Ecology Institute spread less than 1 centimeter forest soil onto farmland that had been chemically degraded for nearly 60 years. Within 6 years, the entire ecosystem shifted. Plant communities recovered, fungal networks rebuilt, 60 years of damage reversed by a handful of dirt. The 1943 USDA manuals recommended this specifically. No corporation can patent what lives under a tree. This week, find undisturbed forest soil under mature trees, take a few handfuls, and work it into your beds. Trick 3. Cover cropping. Your grandmother never left soil bare over winter. She scattered clover or vetch across every empty bed before the first frost. Hairy vetch fixes 80 to 200 pounds of nitrogen per acre for free, manufactured by bacteria living in root nodules pulled directly from the atmosphere. At current fertilizer prices, that is hundreds of dollars of fertility created while you sleep. The fertilizer industry sells you a bag of synthetic nitrogen for $30 to $60 that feeds your soil once and leaves. A $5 packet of clover seeds feeds it for a generation. Scatter seeds on any bare ground this week. Trick 4. Companion planting. Your grandmother planted marigolds next to everything, not for decoration, for warfare. Marigolds release compounds from their roots that suppress nematodes, attract parasitic wasps, and repel whiteflies. A 2024 study found that when corn is attacked by pests, it releases chemical signals through the air that trigger neighboring beans to produce nectar, recruiting predatory wasps. The plants are communicating. They have been communicating for millions of years. We replace that system with a $14 billion pesticide industry. Plant marigolds along every bed border this week. 1 seed, 0 cost. Trick 5. Seed saving. Your grandmother kept a jar. Inside that jar was independence. A 2018 study at the Earlham Institute found that plants saved across generations literally reprogrammed their gene expression to match local soil, local frost, local drought. 4 corporations now control 56% of the global seed market. The Supreme Court ruled in 2013 that farmers cannot replant patented seeds. One farmer owed $84,000 for planting soybeans he bought from a grain elevator. Save 3 seeds from your strongest plant this week. Dry them in shade, store them in glass. That jar is worth more than they want you to know. Trick 6. Compost tea. And I need to be honest with you here. Most gardening channels treat compost tea as gospel. I won't. The Rodel Institute found measurable benefits in crop growth and disease suppression in certain trials. Dr. Harry Hoytink at Ohio State showed that compost builds genuine immune resistance in plants, but Dr. Linda Chalker-Scott at Washington State reviewed the broader literature and found results are deeply inconsistent. A Washington State pilot study found compost tea performed no differently than plain water on brown rot. A USDA study found that adding molasses to the brew allowed dangerous pathogens, including E. coli and salmonella, to multiply by factors of up to 10,000. The honest answer is this: compost itself has overwhelming documented benefits. If you brew tea, use only fully finished compost, skip any additives, and apply it within 4 hours. Or, as one researcher put it plainly, top dress your beds with compost and water it in. Let the soil brew its own tea. That honesty is not a weakness in this video, it is the point. When I tell you the first 5 methods are backed by decades of consistent evidence, you can trust that, because I just showed you I will tell you when they are not. 6 methods, 0 purchases required. Every one of them was official United States government policy in 1943. Every one of them still works today.
Let me show you where we are standing right now. The United Nations says 90% of Earth's topsoil will be at risk by 2050. Iowa's topsoil erodes 25 times faster than it naturally forms. A third of the entire Corn Belt, nearly 30 million acres, has already lost its carbon-rich surface layer completely. Gone. Not depleted. Gone. It takes 1,000 years to generate 3 centimeters of new topsoil. We are losing it in decades. FDR said it plainly in 1937, "A nation that destroys its soils destroys itself." We have been destroying it for 80 years, and we have been paying an industry $200 billion annually for the privilege. Now look at what the 6 methods actually do. Chop and drop stops the bleeding. Every plant you leave on the soil's surface adds carbon, feeds biology, and locks moisture into ground that industrial farming is bleeding dry. Cover cropping heals the wound, roots punching deep into compacted earth, breaking hardpan, pulling nitrogen from the atmosphere, rebuilding the sponge structure that holds water during drought and prevents flooding during rain. Forest soil inoculation restores what chemicals killed. The bacteria, the fungi, the microscopic universe that synthetic fertilizer systematically dismantled, reintroduced from a single handful of living woodland dirt. Companion planting rebuilds the defense systems that pesticides replaced. Plants communicating, recruiting allies, protecting each other through relationships that evolved over millions of years before a single spray bottle existed. Seed saving preserves the memory that corporations are buying up and locking away behind patent walls. Your jar holds genetics adapted to your specific frost, your specific drought, your specific soil, information no commercial catalog can replicate. And even compost, applied honestly and directly to living ground, feeds the biology that feeds the plant through a relationship 400 million years older than the fertilizer industry. Every single one of these methods builds something. Every bag of synthetic fertilizer depletes something. One approach compounds, the other depends. One creates freedom, the other creates a customer. This is not complicated. It never was. So here's what I'm asking you to do. Not all 6, not a complete garden overhaul, not a lifestyle transformation. One hack, just one, this week. Leave your spent plants where they fall after the next harvest. Scatter clover over one bare patch of ground. Walk into the nearest forest and bring home a handful of soil. Save 3 seeds from your strongest tomato before the season ends. Plant 1 border of marigolds. Top dress 1 bed with finished compost and water it in. 1 method, 1 week. That is how 20 million families started.
That is how a nation fed itself when everything else failed. There are two kinds of knowledge in this world: knowledge that makes you dependent and knowledge that sets you free. You just received the second kind. The fertilizer industry prayed you'd never find this. The soil waited 80 years for someone to remember. Now you have. Please click the like and subscribe button so you don't miss our next episode of Garden Wisdom.